Hello, I'm Caitlin Margaret, and welcome back to another Holistic Happiness episode. With the change of seasons well underway, I always feel like September is an excellent month to take stock of the year. Remember those resolutions that you set in January and all of those intentions that you made for 2017? Well, I believe that September, and not December, is really a great time to check in with those goals. Many of us get thrown off track for one reason or another throughout the course of the year. But you've still got more than 3 months left to make some substantial progress on what matters most to you this year. So, how awesome will it be if at the end of this year you can look back and celebrate the incredible progress that you've made towards your dreams? To have real evidence that you are continually growing and developing as a person, and you can know that whatever you put your mind to, you really can do. Now, for most of us, whatever big goals we're working on, the best way is to break this big goal down into really actionable habits. Why? Because habits are things that we repeatedly do. And what you repeatedly do, specifically what you spend your time thinking about, and what you do every day ultimately forms the person that you are, the things that you believe, and the way that you show up in the world. So whether your goal is to eat healthier, or to fix your relationship, or to learn a new language, or start a business, you're going to need to decide on a few key habits that you will consistently perform in order to ensure that you're moving in the right direction. But deciding on the habits is actually a whole lot easier than actually doing them, of course. For example, let's go back to that example of eating healthier. There are lots of habits that you could choose to help you embark on the path, right? You could, for example, choose to start consciously prepping your meals at the beginning of the week. Or you might choose to incorporate vegetables into every meal, or limit your alcohol intake. Whatever habit it is that you choose, the bigger question remains: how are you going to get started? How will you hold yourself accountable? How can this new habit actually become an automatic and sustainable part of who you are as a person? Well, most people try to start a new habit by getting motivated. They believe that this fire burning within will really just help them remember to do whatever new behavior that they're targeting. But this is exactly the wrong way to go about it. If you're human, then your memory and your motivation are going to fail you. It is a fact. So what are the keys to long-lasting habits? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you 5 techniques that consistently work for my clients when they are trying to implement a new behavior. All right, are you ready to go? Step 1. The number 1 habit-forming strategy is to frame your habits in terms of identity. What do I mean by that? This is a really big point from best-selling author James Clear. And so according to James, the key to building lasting habits is focusing on creating a new identity first. You see, your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. What you do now is a mirror image of the type of person that you actually believe that you are, subconsciously or consciously. And each action you perform is driven by the fundamental belief that it is possible. So, to change your behaviors for good, you need to start by believing new things about yourself and your identity. So there's a 2-step process for starting to change your identity. Step 1 is to decide the person that you want to be, or the kind of person that you want to be. And step 2 is to prove it to yourself with small wins. So let's go back to that example again of eating healthy. Your identity mantra here could be something like, I am the kind of person who sets my body up for success. Now, you want to say this mantra regularly to yourself as well as to other people, as consistently as possible. Then, your small win the first week could be not buying any sugary or processed foods for your kitchen. And then, once you've established that, the small win for the second week could be meeting a friend for coffee rather than a cocktail, or something similar like that. So slowly, you truly do become the kind of person that is setting your body up for success. And you establish this identity, and the habits start to naturally follow along. Sorry, okay. Technique number 2. Building on what I said in strategy number 1, perhaps the most important key for making a new habit is to really start small. So maybe some of you have heard of the website Zen Habits. Well, its founder, Leo Babauta, puts it this way. He says, make the habit so easy that you just can't say no. So let's say, for example, that you want to improve your relationship with your mother. Now, you don't want to start by having that deep and difficult conversation about your childhood trauma. And you don't want to start by trying to see her 4 times every week. For the first 1 week, just try spending 1 minute a day writing down one nice thing you remember about your mom. That's it. Why? Well, in the beginning, the performance and the intensity of your actions don't really matter. As I discussed in the last step, or the last strategy, it's really that you want to first discover and establish the type of person who you're going to be. And you want to be the type of person who sticks to this habit and who tenders to this goal. So once you've done that, you can build up your level of performance and intensity over time. For example, once you've gone 7 days where you've been able to say good things about your mom every day, then you can graduate to another slightly more intense habit on the path to this goal. So for example, in the 2nd and the 3rd week, you might write your mom a letter thanking her for all she's done for you. So this second phase is going to be much more achievable, feel much more natural, because you completed that first small habit last week. You established your identity as someone who cares about your mother and cares about mending that relationship with your mother. And the positive memories that you reflected on that week really built a strong foundation for you to write her a letter this week. In habit building, the key is really to start a slow and steady buildup. So once you've decided on the habit you're going to build, your assignment is then to ask yourself, how can I make this new behavior so easy that I can't say no? Strategy number 3, develop a reliable trigger. Now, in the book, The Power of Habit, which is another best-selling book on habits, the author explains that all habits follow a particular cycle, which he calls the habit loop. And the habit loop consists of 3 steps: the trigger, the routine, and the reward. So the trigger is the event that starts the habit. The routine is the repetitive scheduling you put around the habit. And the reward is the benefit that's associated with completing the habit or the behavior. Now, in my experience, most people intuitively kind of understand the routine and the reward parts of this loop, but they struggle more to understand what it means to develop a good trigger system. So I'm just going to take a minute to explain that now. So triggers can take all different kinds of forms and shapes, right? It could be a time or a location. So for example, every day at 8 a.m. I walk my dog. Or every time I go to church, I say a prayer for my grandmother, right? These triggers are location and time-based, right? But triggers can also be another person. For example, whenever I'm with my mom, we always eat a salad. So these triggers become learned associations, and they automatically cue you to perform the next habit that you want to form. Now, another kind of trigger is an event, and I find this to be a really powerful one. So for example, many people use eating dinner as a trigger to say grace. They have it just built into their psyche that before they eat, they should thank God for their blessings. One event, in other words, is triggering another. Now, using events as triggers is often referred to as habit stacking, which is really written extensively about in Jay Scott's book called, guess what? Habit stacking. So this technique was also really key for me to build my meditation habit. So I decided to use one of my least favorite activities, which was commuting to work, as a way to nurture my relaxation response. So whenever I was waiting for a train to go to work, I would practice deep breathing. Deep, conscious inhales and exhales. Now, not only did this make my commute more tolerable, but it also really helped to develop my habit of taking these nourishing, slow, and steady breaths whenever I felt stressed. So when you are implementing your new habit and you're choosing a trigger, you need to make sure it's something reliable like that, like your commute, which is an everyday activity. So if you want to try to use an event to trigger your new habit, you can try this. Write down the things that you do each day or the things that happen to you each day without fail. For example, every day without fail, you brush your teeth, you turn on the lights, you flush the toilet, etc., right? And every day without fail, you, let's say, get an email from your boss, or your dog barks, or the sun sets, right? These are things that already happen, preceding events. Now choose any one of these activities and decide to pair it up with a new habit that you're trying to implement. That will be the reliable trigger and a consistent reminder for you to stay on track. Okay, next up, habit building technique number 4. Up the stakes. So here's the thing. When people talk to me about why their attempts at implementing a new habit have failed, they usually blame it on a lack of resources. I don't have the money, they'll tell me, or I just don't have the time is a very common response. Or I don't have the technology, or I don't have the skills, or the knowledge, or the network. The list goes on, right? But while this lack of resources can definitely be a challenge to implementing a new habit, it is not really the source of the problem. It's not about a lack of resources. It's about a lack of resourcefulness. I'll tell you what I mean by this. So think about this. Right now, I bet you can think of at least one friend that you don't see as often as you'd like. And you'd probably tell me that it's a lack of resources that's getting in the way of seeing that friend more often. You might say something like, we're both just so busy, we don't find time to meet up. But imagine if that friend called you up tomorrow and told you that they had been diagnosed with cancer and they didn't have much time left to live. How would you react? My guess is that you would absolutely find a way to spend more time with them in the days and weeks to come. Why? Why would you suddenly be able to make that happen? Because it was never about your lack of resources. It was about your priorities. It was about your lack of resourcefulness. Some of the most successful people in history come from absolutely nothing. Think about Jim Carrey or J.K. Rowling or Oprah Winfrey. Each of these people had a goal, though, and they pursued it mercilessly, not letting any lack of resources get in the way. And you can do this too. If you really want something about it, if you're passionate enough, if you're creative enough and hardworking enough and loving enough and committed enough, you can find the answer. You can achieve whatever goal or habit that you want to start if you work hard enough. So to keep yourself really deeply committed to your task, you have to up the stakes. As Tony Robbins always says, if you want to stay on the island, burn the boats. So when the stakes are high, you become much more passionate about finding and pursuing the solution. That's why many people only change their diets when they get a critical medical diagnosis. They knew they were unhealthy before, but now they're faced with the prospect of death. Their boats have been burned, in other words, and the only way for them to survive is to change the way they eat. So as much as possible, you want to make sure you do not give yourself a way out. You want to increase the stakes so that you increase your commitment to and your creativity towards your new habit. If you want to write a book, you need to carve out time to sit down and write every day. So, how can you increase the stakes so that you don't only want to do it, but you really feel like you have to do it? How can you make it seem like writing is a necessity and not just a hobby? Well, what if you gave $1,000 to your friends, making them promise to return it only if you write every day for the next 30 days? I'm sure your motivation would increase then, right? So would your passion and your creativity for finding the time. So just ask yourself, how can I up the stakes? What boats can I burn to make sure that I adopt this habit once and for all? Finally, we've reached habit building strategy number 5. When you slip, get back on track as quickly as possible. Now, for this strategy, I am looking straight at you, my perfectionist friends. So many of my clients start off really strong with their new habit, but then an unexpected bump in the road comes along and they get thrown off track. And once they have broken their streak, they become filled with shame or guilt or resentment towards themselves. And then they come back to my office and they say, "See, Caitlin, I told you I wasn't capable of maintaining this habit. I quit." So I'll give you an example of a client that this happened to recently. One of my clients was trying to wean himself off of video games. He had a pretty serious video game addiction. And he was doing really well for about 2 weeks. But then a Friday night came along and he was really, really exhausted after a tough week at work. And so he sat down to play a quick video game and just relax and unwind for 15 minutes. Well, lo and behold, before he even realized, it had been 4 hours where he had been playing video games. He had skipped his dinner, missed his date, and he just felt like he couldn't stop. So what did he do? He gave up on himself and he chose to just continue playing all weekend long. But here's the thing. Each and every one of us have ups and downs. It's a part of life. Building new life-improving habits is a journey. It's not a sprint. Even the world's top performers make mistakes. They commit errors and they get off track too. But the difference between them and everyone else is that they always get back on track as quickly as possible. You can make incredible progress if you are consistent and patient. So when you're implementing a new habit, prepare ahead for the worst case scenario. Ask yourself, when I fall off the wagon, and I know I will, how can I make sure that I get back on that wagon as soon as possible? Maybe you can pre-record a pep talk you want to hear in the moments that you're struggling, or maybe you can ask one of your friends to be an accountability partner and they make sure to check in with you once a week to see that you've kind of staying in the race. Whatever it is, find a strategy that makes you leave your perfectionism behind and just stay the course. As Voltaire once put it, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. All right, my friends, well, that's it for today. I hope September is a month of starting and sticking to really great habits for all of you. And I wish you the best of luck with all the amazing goals that you're working towards. See you soon.